Newly declassified documents show links between the 9/11 hijackers and Saudi nationals with connections to the Saudi government. The information comes from a 2016 FBI report that summarized an investigation called Operation Encore. The document had been kept under wraps. President Biden ordered it to be declassified, and the FBI complied 20 years to the day after the 9/11 attacks. The report is heavily redacted, but family members who have been pushing for its release say it is a critical first step. Senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge joins us now by phone from Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where alleged 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 other terror suspects are currently facing trial. Catherine, does this report show that straight-line link between the Saudi government and the 9/11 hijackers?
Well, Lana, what the documents show is that there were repeated contacts between Saudis who worked for their government inside the U.S. and the hijackers. And that's important because the 9/11 Commission found that any contacts were a coincidence. But what the declassified records show is that they were purposeful. In many cases, they were pre-planned. And what they did is they helped the first 2 hijackers into the United States in January 2000, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar, get their ground legs in California, and then ultimately they moved on to the East Coast. And this matters because those hijackers spent the most time in the United States. They were the beachhead for the 9/11 operation. And they spoke virtually no English and had no experience in the West when they arrived. And this was a lingering question for the 9/11 Commission. They were so important, and they clearly needed help to get established in order for the operation to succeed.
And a lingering question, obviously, for those family members who have been pushing for the release. Earlier this month, Catherine, you spoke with one of the FBI investigators who said, quote, "You don't need to have 26 years of experience to figure out the terrorists had domestic support." Do you feel like these documents prove that and give those 9/11 families a validation that they've been seeking?
Well, the 9/11 families are suing the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for money. This is a civil case, so the preponderance of the evidence is not beyond a reasonable doubt. These records certainly go some way, if not a long way, to building this circumstantial case. When you look at the records, what jumps out at me, big picture, is that when we came out of the 9/11 Commission report in 2004, the conclusion was there was no there was no evidence that Saudi government employees had purposefully helped the hijackers. But Operation Encore, these records, are showing it in a very different light. And investigator Danny Gonzalez, in his first TV interview, a member of Operation Encore, said, "You always have to look at the organization behind the individuals who commit the crime." He said he learned that from FBI Director Louis Freeh. And in this case, he said it was not possible for 19 men to kill nearly 3,000 Americans that day without a support network and a support structure that helped them move seamlessly around the United States for a nearly 2-year period.
And pages 13 through 15 of the report specifically talk about the support that the hijackers did receive from those Saudi nationals. Still, Catherine, it dropped late overnight. Trying to read it was a bit difficult because it's so heavily redacted. Are you surprised that the reaction from the 9/11 families has been so positive, given that? Are they really seeing in this document all that they hoped? And where do things go from here?
Well, under the executive order from President Biden, this is the first step in a series of declassifications, and there's a pretty tight timeline over the next 120-odd days for more reports to be released, but I think more importantly, the underlying records. In this particular case, you're absolutely right. Decoding it is difficult because it's so heavily redacted. But the attorneys who've been working for the 9/11 families, based on their own investigation and research, are able to fill in a lot of these blank spaces that are puzzling, I think, to most people. I would simplify it this way because I think this is easy for people to get their arms around. This Saudi national who worked for the government, Omar al-Bayoumi, always maintained that he had a chance meeting with two hijackers in a Middle East restaurant in Los Angeles, and then he offered to help them. But what this document shows in the part that's not redacted is that this was planned, if you will, and his explanation to the 9/11 Commission that he had overheard them speaking Gulf Arabic, and this is why he offered to help them, was undercut by a witness who was there that day, who said he actually approached them from a great distance in the restaurant. There was no way he could have hurt them. And I keep talking about these two hijackers in San Diego because they were the beachhead for the entire operation. If they had not succeeded in getting their ground legs in 2000, it would have jeopardized the attacks themselves about a year and a half later.
And Catherine, as you mentioned, Bayoumi had this very strong connection to the Saudi government. He was described as a ghost employee of the
Correct.
Saudi consulate in Los Angeles. There was plenty of concern heading into the release of this report about whether this would damage the U.S.-Saudi relationship, which is so important in the Middle East. What effect is it now having?
I think it's too early to say what the impact will be. I think we'll have, Lana, a much better sense of the impact 6 months from now, when I expect there'll be at least two more significant developments. The first, I previously mentioned, which is the release of additional documents, especially the underlying raw data, including phone records, which we now see from the declassified documents were extremely important to the FBI probe. But the release of these records may ultimately allow the court that's handling the lawsuit for the family against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to lift a protective order, because many of these key individuals, Bayoumi, this Clara Al-Sumieri, and others, gave depositions to the family's lawyers in the summer of this year. And those depositions should be a wealth of information. And that, I think, truly is when we'll know the impact of the release. And whether it really goes to the kingdom itself, and I put that in quotation marks, or whether the argument can be made that these were the actions of a small rogue group who worked for the Saudi government and did not reflect the wishes of the kingdom.
Well, Catherine, I always appreciate how you put those puzzle pieces together. Thank you for joining.
You're welcome.